Great. Good evening, everybody. This is Brendan Magnan, Chair of the Milford Inland Wetlands Agency. I'd like to call to order the November 6, 2024 meeting, a regular meeting of the Inland Wetlands Agency. Lisa, could you please call the roll?
Daniel Bedecker.
Here.
Ranjit Bahav.
Here.
Brian Black.
Here.
Jim Connors.
Here.
Jim. Matthew Connors.
Here.
Steve Munson. Steve.
Here.
Nick Ritchie.
Here.
Julie Valvo.
Here.
Buddy Field.
Here.
Brendan Magnan.
Here. Thank you, Lisa. Mayor Rose, could you introduce the statutory obligation?
Yes. As we continue to host remote meetings, I want to make the opportunity to highlight a few guidelines to ensure business runs efficiently and that all statutory and administrative rules are followed. In accordance with the Freedom of Information Act and Governor Lamont's executive orders, this meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the City of Milford website. During this meeting, if members of the Inland Wetlands Commission would like to speak, please utilize the raise your hand feature via Zoom. All participants will be muted during the meeting unless recognized by the chair. After being recognized to speak, please state your name and address prior to making a statement. Speak only to items in the jurisdiction of the MIWA, wetlands, brooks, rivers, flooding, and wetland habitat. Zoning issues are not under our review.
Thank you, Mary Rose. At this time, I'd like to invite everyone to unmute themselves and stand and join us in this Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance
To
the flag
of
the United States of
America,
And to the republic
for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty
and
and justice for all.
Could everyone please mute themselves until recognized by me? At this time, I'd like to move on to public comments. Are there any public comments directed to the agency on topics not otherwise on the agenda? These would be topics not otherwise on the agenda. Anyone wishing to address the agency? Going twice. One final round. Hearing none, moving on. Mayor Rose, can you introduce item D1, please?
Sure. I just want to let the applicant know that I've shared the screen so they can share their maps when they're ready. This is a proposal by Nick Vicino of CN LLC for construction of 6 units in 2 buildings. The Wepawag River, an adjacent wetland, a flood zone, and a floodway around the
Mayor
roads.
Rose. Could everyone go on mute, please, if you're attending the meeting, and stay on mute until you're recognized by the chair? Go ahead, Mayor Rose.
Okay. The wetlands have been delineated by Stephen Danzer, PhD, and were evaluated by David H. Lord, CSS. The site plans, reports, city engineers' memos, and applicants' responses and information requested by the agency are in the meeting documents. At our last meeting, the agency had questions about the invasive knotweed on the property and the methods of controlling that. There is a link in the documents with fact sheets and approaches to Japanese knotweed mitigation, in addition to the invasive species management report by David Lord. Items the commissioners requested were that invasive species eradication plan, a planting and mitigation plan with success criteria and timelines that has not been received, but that could be submitted to the office prior to permit issuance if the agency so chooses. And a proposed planting and mitigation monitoring bonds that has not been received, that could also be required to be submitted prior to permit issuance. Mr. Chairman, this evening you have Robert Weway of Codispodian Associates, David H. Lord of Soils Resource Consultants, and Nick Vicino, the property owner.
Thank you, Mary Rose, for the overview. To the applicant team, is there anything you'd like to add to the record?
Yeah, hi. Good evening. This is Bob Weway from Codispodian Associates. Basically, we've submitted the revised set of plans to the commission last week. Those revisions mostly implemented some of the recommendations by your city engineer, Greg Pedlutsky. In addition to that, the commission did request those 3 specific items, and we have David Lord with us tonight, and I would turn it over to him, as most of those items are more appropriately addressed by his firm.
Thank you, Mr. Weway. Mr. Lord?
Yes, good evening. For the record, David Lord, Soil Resource Consultants. I have prepared a number of documents for this application. I'm going to start with the invasive species management and control plan that has, I believe, been submitted and is in the application package. Has anyone or everyone seen that? There we go. This is a step-by-step process whereby we are proposing to control the existing Japanese knotweed stands on the property. The Japanese knotweed is primarily located in a band that's about 25 feet east of the Wepawag River. It's not in a wetland, it's in the adjacent upland review zone that we are proposing. There is also a stand in the very northwestern corner of the property, which is immediately adjacent to the Wepawag River. That one will be discussed in a moment. It's going to try to use a different alternative method for it. Japanese knotweed is a very difficult plant, invasive plant, to control because of its growth pattern. And for those of you that are familiar with the plant, it has a hollow center core and a very thin outer band of plant tissue. The primary means for controlling it is to cut the existing stems off about 1 to 2 inches above the ground several times during the growing season when they are actively growing. The cut materials need to be bagged and taken off-site for proper disposal, generally through burning or other means. In the fall, the last cutting of the season would be one in which, again, you would cut the plant off about 1 to 2 inches, generally in late July, September, even into into September. Any regrowth that occurs in the fall there would be treated with a systemic herbicide such as rodeo, which is labeled in Connecticut as a systemic herbicide to attack the root system and the plant supplies that the root is sending, the plant is sending to the root of the plant, thereby killing the plant. The root systems on the Japanese knotweed are extremely viable and difficult to control without the use of a systemic herbicide. As little as 1.5 inches of root particle can regrow a plant on its own, and doesn't need any special growth medium or anything else. If we leave that viable section of root in the ground, it will regrow. This particular herbicide cutting and control method generally will take multiple years, as many as 3 years, sometimes more, to be able to kill and control all of the rhizomes of the plant. That's what would generally be needed. We'd monitor on an annual basis to see when regrowth occurs, and the property owner or the permit holder would be responsible for cutting off the plant in as many cutting applications as they can during the growing season. The last cutting, the herbicide application, would be done under my supervision to make sure it's done appropriately using a wick type applicator to treat the cut stems of the plant. The last alternative, the last one, which is actually on page 2 of this document, if we could just shift there, the use of alternative number 1, the use of black plastic sheeting or tarps to cover the entire stand of the knotweed has been shown to be effective in certain circumstances. The invasives need to be cut off and covered early in the spring as soon as new growth is started. The black covering creates a elevated temperature and does not give access for the plant to sunlight. The tarp needs to be attached, weighted down so it doesn't blow or move through the growing season. But then at the end of the season, it would be checked. Tarp would be pulled back to see what effectiveness the tarp has had. It would be placed there again in the overwintering position or season to control it over the winter because these plants grow very, very quickly, and we could actually get resprouting if we get a warm spell during the non-growing season of the year. Another alternative that I've just mentioned is there are professional contract consultants who specialize in the control and eradication of these types of invasives. That's another alternative whereby you have a professional contractor who would control the, would operate and maintain the control and eradication of the invasives. In completion, an annual report submitted to the Wetland Agency by October 1st of each year would be submitted with documentation, photos, number of applications, number of cutting operations, number of applications of herbicide, and the effectiveness of those treatment measures for any particular growing season year, calling for those out until we have a season where there is no regrowth of the invasives. That's a rather quick overview of the invasives control plan, which I've used on many sites to control the Japanese knotweed and remove it from a particular construction site that I'm associated with. And that's those are all over the state wherever I'm working, and there is the invasives present. At the appropriate time, I'll be happy to try to answer any questions that members may have.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Lord, for your overview. Which of the options are you, on behalf of the applicant, recommending or intending to exercise?
I think the use of the multiple cuttings during the growing season and the wick application of the glyphosate herbicide in the fall is the one that I have seen used most extensively, very successful, and is the one primary method that we are proposing to do. The one area in the northwest corner of the site where we're in close proximity to the Wepawag River, I would recommend the use of the plastic sheeting method, which does not require active herbicide application in those situations where you're covering it with plastic sheeting or tarps. So 2 methods, and that's what I am proposing to use on this particular site. The stands that are in the linear path in the upland review zone are not extensively wide. I think those can be done reasonably with minimal amount of effort in cutting and removal of the above ground section of the plant. It does run for a length of time. Those areas would need to be marked at the beginning of the growing season so that we know, and the applicant holder knows exactly where to go to do the cutting. And I would facilitate that mark out and make sure that all of the above ground plant materials have been cut to the appropriate length.
Okay. Mayor Rose, can you just scroll to the top of this document, please? Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Lord from the agency? Mr. Matthew Connors.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Hey, David, I just had a quick, sorry, Mr. Lord. I had a quick question. As I raised up, there was a technique, I know it's newer technology. I wasn't sure if it was looked into, but apparently it's the safest in terms of the removal because it's using steam technology to steam the soil. It basically burns the rhizomes, I believe, of basically the roots of the plant. I've heard that it's been getting some real success. I don't know if the technology is accessible or how affordable it is, but I've heard it cuts the time in half and the labor. Was that something into at
I
all?
am not familiar with that particular method. I haven't seen it used, and I have not seen any literature that talks about the effectiveness of that. It appears to sound like you need a specific piece of equipment to generate the steam and the application of the steam. That might be a technique that would require the utilization of a professional weed control specialist company, such as All Habitats is one that I'm familiar with that I've seen, but I do not have any experience or knowledge of the steam method of control. The ones that are talked about in this control plan, I have personal experience with them and I have seen them be effective.
Thank you for the response. Any other questions on that, Mr. Connors? Okay, Mr. Munson?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman. When you put down the tarp, you obviously have to weight it. The Whipplewog does flood pretty frequently. The level, the Whipplewog there, I'm pretty familiar with. It goes up and down quite well. Will the tarp resist being flooded away?
Moved by any floodwaters?
Yeah.
Well, in this circumstance, we would use rebar stakes in addition to concrete cement blocks to hold the area and hold the tarps in place. After major storms where there is out of bank flooding, they would need to be inspected and replaced, maintained, corrected so that they're still providing the level of coverage that is proposed.
Is that normal that it be monitored when you're using tarp? Is that for I assume you use the tarp when you're close to a water source like that.
That is one, and other circumstances generally associated with municipal or the last two I worked on they were on school property, and they would not allow any herbicide usage on the school grounds. So that method of covering it with the tarp was the one that was chosen for those instances. But the rodeo which is specifically formulated to be used on aquatic vegetation directly in the water, is a very effective systemic herbicide. And for those of you that are not familiar with the wick applicator, it looks like a paint roller on a long stick. You don't actually spray, you wipe the herbicide over the plant that you're trying to kill. It minimizes to totally eliminates any killing of associated adjacent vegetation, such as is very difficult to control even with low volume herbicide sprayers. I really like the wick type applicator for that reason, that it directly targets only the plants invasives that you want to control.
Thank you again for that. Mr. Matthew Connors.
Mr. Lord, I was just curious. I know you said you like the wick application. Was there a reason you chose the wick application over the injection method?
The difference with Japanese knotweed is that the growth wall of the Japanese knotweed very closely resembles, to give you a picture, a very thin-walled bamboo stem. There's not a whole lot of plant along the outer edge of the stalks to inject the herbicide into. Now, I have seen them pour, when it's a small stand, I have seen them cut off the Japanese knotweed stem and pour herbicide down the gap in the stem of the Japanese knotweed. But in my opinion, that's a somewhat excessive use of herbicide. And that's one of the reasons why I like the weed application, because it's very low volume and you apply the herbicide to the active growing part of the plant, which is where the control happens. That's been my experience and my belief that the injection method does not work on the Japanese knotweed because of its growth shape. It's more appropriate when you're trying to kill larger stemmed plants such as autumn olive, Japanese Russian olive, large stems of multiflora rose, and you have something you can actually inject into.
Thank you. And the last follow-up was in terms of the wick application, is there any concern from, obviously we're doing this in the spring, rainy season, is there any concern of the pesticide somehow leaching in any way, or is it just that safe of an application?
Okay, the wick applications will be done in the fall after the last cutting and removal of the upper growth. And there is some, the theory behind this is multiple cuttings of the growing plant stresses the entire plant and it uses up the food reserves in the plant. That last cutting, you apply the herbicide and the plant literally takes in and absorbs the herbicide and takes it down to the root systems along with the food supply to overwinter. And that's where you get the kill of the root systems in the systemic herbicide. The rodeo and its original formula Roundup, when used in very small amounts with a wick applicator, the herbicide comes in contact with any soil particles, it's automatically bonded to the soil particles. It doesn't leach, it doesn't flow off through the surface of the soil. It bonds very tightly to the soil particles. I've not seen any problems with a properly used application of the wick. We're talking about extremely small application amounts.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Yes, thanks for the great explanation. Who in your proposal would be applying these treatments?
It would be a license, someone who has a license for the application of herbicides. Most landscaping contractors have a person in their group that has a herbicide application license. These aren't seriously, or don't have the right term, the highest critical level of herbicide restriction. They are ones that are used on a regular basis. The homeowner can buy and use Roundup and other systemic herbicides. So the reason you want to use a landscape contractor, because then they would have the tools, the equipment, and the expertise for using them rather than a homeowner or
Right.
developer per se is that.
I may have missed it, Mr. Lord, but I don't see that called out in this plan.
That needs to be added.
And
It
earlier
is
you
usually in
mentioned-
there. I did not include that sentence. I will add that.
Okay, great. Yeah, and you had verbally conveyed that this annual report would be submitted by October 1st. Did you mean October
Yes,
1st?
that would be done by me. That would keep track of the number of cuttings, the
Sure.
number of applications and photos documenting after the cuttings and at the end of the season and in the spring in successive years, and document to the
Right. Will that be October 1st, as you said earlier, or October 31st as reflected in the document?
October 31st. The applications would likely be done before then, but
Right.
from a practical standpoint, putting all the reports together, I try to get them in by October 31st.
Understood. Okay, thanks.
And that is sort of a standard that I use because October 31st, in the control of some invasive plants, we can actually go out and do an additional treatment after that spelled out in the annual report. It didn't work in a certain area. We're going to go back out and reapply a treatment practice. That's sort of a standard date that I use. It seems to work out best.
Okay. Any other questions from the agency for Mr. Lord?
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Rose?
Mr. Lord, when you're amending the report to include the protocols for being on site, do the contractors, the licensed contractor or landscaper need to clean their equipment before they enter the site to not introduce other invasives onto the site? And to make sure that they're properly exporting the invasives off the site?
We can add a note to inform the landscapers that they should have clean equipment for that, but I'm not always on site when the landscapers are coming onto a site to do a treatment method application. But we can certainly add a statement to that effect to the plan, making it a request, a strongly worded request to clean the equipment prior to coming onto the site. Just by word of note, I would think at this point in time, with all the invasive pressures that we have in Connecticut, I would hope that the landscape contractors are cognizant of that concern and do take steps to protect themselves from introducing invasives onto a site where there aren't any presently. But we will add that into the control plan.
And one more question, Mr. Chair. So how important is it to cut those stems and treat very quickly. I don't know that you want them to cut a whole stand and come back tomorrow and treat them. I feel like you need to treat the stems reasonably quickly after they've been cut.
Yes, the let's see, items 3 and 4 talk about that. The item 3, the final cutting of the knotweed should be done in late July, early August, removing all of the material and bagging it as talked about earlier. Item 4, the treatment of the knotweed regrowth when it has reached a height of 1 to 2 inches, usually September and August, is when you'd make the treatment with the systemic herbicide. So it's final cutting, allow additional regrowth, and then we treat with the rodeo.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I think my question was more, are the landscapers going to come on site, clear all the bamboo today or the knotweed today, and then come back tomorrow or the next day and treat? Or are they going to cut half the stand, treat it, cut the other half and treat it to ensure that it hasn't closed off and that you're actually taking in the herbicide?
The cutting of the Japanese knotweed on this site will not take a long period of time. We can cut all of the knotweed on the site at a particular time, bag and remove the upper portion of the plant, let the plant stay, and it's the regrowth plant bodies that we are treating with the systemic herbicide. It's not the same that we're cutting. It's the ones that regrow after the cutting.
Thank you.
And that will be spelled out by myself to the landscaper or the person that will be responsible for these treatment methods. They will know how they go about following this plan.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question on timing. Given that we're here reviewing the application, and should we approve this, none of this work could really start until July of next year. Is that correct? Or are the weather conditions being so warm, could the resources be available to address this?
It would be difficult. We can certainly cut and remove the existing stand of knotweed at this point in time and let it overwinter in a cut state. I don't know how much regrowth would take place at this particular time of the year. We have a nice warm period right now, but I don't know if that's long enough to get the regrowth we'd need for the herbicide application. So we can begin to weaken the Japanese knotweed plants on site by the cutting methods as soon as the approval is granted.
Understood. Okay. And Mary Rose, perhaps a question directed to you, and then Matthew, I'll give you the floor. Do we have a standard bond provision that we would apply to this plan, this control plan? I believe we do, correct?
We would typically bond this under the mitigation and monitoring plan. Mr. Mr. Wee had testified earlier that the plantings for this site won't happen until well after this area is treated, because they didn't want any issues with the new plantings. So the mitigation monitoring bond would be for the monitoring and treatment of the knotweed, and then the eventual planting of the mitigation area.
Understood. Mr. Connors, did you have a question?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Just reading this management control plan, there's some language that it's kind of bothering me because it's not so specific in terms of, Mr. Lord, the removal of the plants. It says all cut plant materials should be composted or bagged for proper disposal in a landfill. Last time I checked, Japanese knotweed should not be composted because the rhizomes are so easily spread to other areas.
Okay, that can be taken out. That will be changed to all cut plant materials will be bagged for proper disposal in a landfill.
You.
Great, thanks. Great discussion. Any other questions for Mr. Lord? Mary Rose, can you just give us a guidance, a steer on what else we need to contemplate on this, and what are our options at this point? Do we?
The agency has received this a few meetings ago. No petition was asked for a public hearing. Agency had determined they did not need a site walk. So this evening, the agency can change that if they want to do a site walk. If they want more information, they can ask for more information. If they need any other review for this site. City engineers, let me just show that. The city engineers, pardon me while I scroll. Memo came in this afternoon reviewing the latest revision of the plans, and there was no substantive information for the wetlands agency other than noting that while the plants are being taken care of for the invasives management area, there should be silt fencing downstream, which I believe Mr. Lord referenced in his earlier report. And that's the standard. So if the agency chooses, they can approve the application this evening. We do not have bond calculations yet. Those did not come in, but that can be done afterwards. Sorry, I don't know what happened there. There we go. And or you can wait and get the final report from Mr. Lord and review that at our meeting on the 20th. The city engineer did ask, and I believe we had mentioned it earlier, that we condition that the operation and maintenance manuals for the stormwater collection and mitigation system were to be prepared and recorded on the land records to ensure that this and any future property owners are aware of the maintenance requirements of a paver system. And if it's not vacuumed, it soon is not doing any infiltration.
And what's the status on that?
That came out in the report today. I don't believe Mr. Weiwei has had a chance to do that. He may be able to answer for that.
Mr. Weiwei?
Yeah, I have not seen Mr. Podolsky's review comments that came in today. The operations and maintenance plan was originally included in our stormwater management report. That has been separated out and it has been provided to the Inland Wetlands Commission. And I believe from what I was able to discern from Mr. Podolsky's comments is that he wants that put on the land records. And we would have no problem doing that at the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wheeler. What's the prerogative of the agency? Do you want to table any action this evening and wait for the revised knotweed invasive plan? And I guess there were other items, Mary Rose, that you mentioned in your intro that are outstanding, such as the planting and mitigation plan. Mr. Weiwei, can you advise when do you intend to provide that?
Which document was that again?
The planting and mitigation plan and success criteria with timelines.
I think that was included in Mr. Lord's report, and he would probably be the best to put the timelines on there. And I think he did mention that in his presentation, or alluded to it.
I think what we talked about earlier and what we viewed was an invasive control plan. It's not a planting and mitigation plan. Two different things.
Okay, well, we have the planting plan, which was included on our landscape plan, and we just carried the general note because at that time we did not have the report from Mr. Lord. So again, I think in terms of any additions to our drawings, I don't foresee any additional information being included on the drawing. I think most of it's going to be in per his report, and it's just going to have to get dealt with in the field. Are you asking specifically to identify the specific locations of where the knotweed is?
No. And Mary Rose, can you maybe remind us of the conversation that we had? I believe this came up in the last meeting.
Right, through you, Mr. Chairman, at the last meeting, the agency, wanted a planting and mitigation plan with a success criteria. It would include, because the mitigation plan includes the knotweed, it would include the timing for the mitigation plan, which Mr. Lord just said he could provide. But the success criteria and would need to also include when the mitigation plantings would be put in, how those are monitored. Typically, we'd monitor those for 3 years, but if you're doing knotweed for 3 or more years, and then you're doing plantings, we don't want to stream you out a very long time, but we also want to make sure that the plan that's proposed as seen on that screen is what actually, goes forth and the plants succeed and with vigor and survive. So we're looking for, you're going to start cutting July of 25 and do that per David's, Mr. Lord's proposed plan for X number of years, or until, no knotweed plants are seen for, 2 or 3, whatever visits. And then you'll put in the plantings as proposed on the planting plan and monitor those for X number of years, while also monitoring to see if any knotweed starts to resurface. So we don't have a plan like that to measure the success. We need to know what the success is in order to release the bond.
Thank you, Mary Rose.
This is David. I can provide my standard post-completion monitoring details, which is a 3-year. You go out every year, you count the plants, you take photographs, you document what is in, comments on growth that has occurred since the last reporting period, and document the establishment of the plantings. And that could just be timed to a point when the eradication of the Japanese knotweed is completed. That would be implemented. The planting plan that's on the drawings would be implemented at that time, and a 3-year monitoring period for those plants would start up.
That's what we're looking for, Mr. Lord. I mean,
Okay,
the current
I
plan,
can provide that post-completion steps, no problem.
and the linkage to when these other plantings would then commence, right, that are on the plan. Like, the overview is fine, but it's not as sort of tailored to the actual plan for this project. So it just needs to bring it all together.
Yes, I can add to the control plan as an additional section that will refer to post-completion of the control plan starts the implementation of the mitigation plantings. And
Great.
that has its own timeline.
Great. I think given the importance of this, and given that we surfaced this in the last discussion, we should not take any action on this until we see that. That would be my recommendation. Looking for anybody else's input.
I
on that.
agree.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. It's important. So unless there's any other questions, we can take no action on this. We can await your revised submission, Mr. Ward and Mr. Weiwei, and we can see you at the next meeting. Providing you do submit that revised plan in advance of the next meeting. And that will give us an opportunity for you to respond, Mr. Weiwei, to the latest response from the engineering department. Any questions? Thank you very much for your testimony, Mr. Ward. Thanks, Mr. Weiwei. Moving on to item next on the agenda, Mary Rose.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is B2. I believe it's 42, I'm sorry, 240081. It's 42 Melba Street. This had been sent out up to DEP for clarification of jurisdiction. DEP is working with the applicant on a timeline for that. I would suggest tabling this application until there's clarification of jurisdiction from Connecticut DEP.
Okay, thank you, Mary Rose. Moving on to new business. Do we have a motion to reorder the agenda to hear item E1 last under the new business?
So moved.
Excuse me, can I just, are you tabling that or just taking no action?
Taking no action,
Okay.
I believe, is the approach. Is that right, Mary Rose? Just to be clear.
Agency can do either. You can take no action this evening, or you can table it until we hear back from DEEP, and then we'll pick it up off the table, make a motion to pick it up off the table and hear it and review it.
Yeah, or we can just take no action. Right, as you said. Okay, so let's do that. Keep it simple. Okay, did I hear a motion to reorder the agenda to hear item E1 under last?
Yes, you did.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Munson. We have a motion. We have a second. Mr. Ritchie?
I'll second.
Okay. Ms. Balvo, any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor? Lisa, roll call.
Aye.
vote. Sorry.
Daniel Bedecker,
Aye.
Ranjit Bahav,
Aye.
Brian Black,
Aye.
Jim Connors. Jim,
Aye.
Matthew Connors,
Aye.
Steve Munson,
Aye.
Nick Ritchie,
Aye.
Julie Valvo,
Aye.
Buddy Field,
Aye.
Brendan Magnan.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank
Point of
you.
order, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Field would be the non-voting alternate in this case.
Gotcha.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item E2. Mary Rose, if you could introduce this matter, please.
This is item E2. It's 240050. It's 43 Rogers Avenue. It's an application. Let me just share my screen for a second. Hold on. Get to plans for the site. And click, sorry. There you go. You can look at the plans while we talk. This is an application by the Orzo Pizzelli Revocable Trust to remove the rear 15 feet by 31 feet portion of the existing garage down to the slab, with work within 150 feet of a wetland in the Wepawag River watershed. The proposed work is being done to bring the site into zoning compliance. Previously, there was a large amount of material and debris stored on the property. The owners have had the material and debris removed and are now in the process of trying to legalize the garage structure to comply with zoning. The proposed work is to remove the rear 15 feet by 31 feet of a metal garage structure and leave the concrete pad that it sits on. We received correspondence from attorney Joe Tramuta stating that there is not and will not be anything hazardous stored at the property or in the garage. The meeting documents include photos from my site walk, attorney Tramuta's correspondence, and the existing and proposed site plans. The site falls off, this is the top of the bank and there's the bottom, falls off behind the garage towards the wetlands. I do have field pictures that I can share
Not
with
seeing
you.
anything? Is it just me? I'm not seeing a share.
It's not sharing?
I don't see it, but
Try that again. That's an aerial of the site.
now we see it.
All right, is that too big for your screen or is it okay?
It's fine.
All right. So it's an aerial of the site. This blue pin is 43 Rogers. This is the garage structure that's to the rear. This is debris that's in this aerial, but as you can see from this more recent one from the spring, the debris is all removed from the site.
Sorry, you were
This
going too fast there, Melrose. Can you just highlight the debris that you're referring to?
material here by the garage was remnants that was on site, I think, last year at some point.
And now
I-
the picture is.
And now a map from March this year shows debris is all removed. This water course behind is the Torrey Brook, and these are wetlands and marsh associated with Torrey Brook. The top of bank is roughly here, and it falls off towards the marsh. The site documents, here the screen, give you a picture of that. This is the rear of the garage now. The garage would then, in the future, be 15 feet to the right of this photo. That's looking out over the marsh, looking out over the slope down to the marsh. This is the garage from the front. This portion would be removed, and the concrete slab would remain. Removal of that slab would destabilize the slope. I wouldn't recommend removing the slab. This is a side view of the garage and the debris removed from the yard. And I don't know that we have any other pictures. It's just the remainder of the site that's been cleaned. Does anyone have any questions? And
Rose,
Attorney,
can you review what our options are this evening. Is this a pre-application? Is that right?
this is a pre-application. They would like to get this work done. The agency can accept it as a pre-application and approve it with no conditions. Or they can require a full application, have them come back in 2 weeks and present any other information you'd like to see. And then you can condition and bond the application.
Understood.
I'm sorry, the approval.
Right. Mr. Trumata, if that's how you say your last name, could you introduce yourself to the record? And if you'd like to add anything to the record, that would be great.
Sure, please. Good evening. It's Joe Tremuta. I'm an attorney in Milford at 9 Lafayette Street, and actually not far from 43 Rogers Ave, where the subject property is located. There were another issue, as Mary Rose aptly stated. There was a lot of debris in the yard. It was basically a collection of various items. All those items were removed. It was subject of litigation. I've worked through with Deborah Kelly from the city's attorney's office, and with Stephen Harris and with Mary Rose. We also submitted a survey because Mary Rose and Stephen Harris wanted to actually a drawing of the garage being reduced. So there is a survey, I believe, that Mary Rose has as well, that shows the garage going from 1,000 square feet to 600 square feet, which would then put it in compliance. Initially, when I first got involved in this matter, we were thinking, Mr. Harris was thinking that possibly the size of ancillary buildings might increase. So the issue was that the house, the size of the house itself is not large enough to accommodate the garage at the current size. So it has to, 400 square feet need to be removed for Mr. Harris. And by removing the 400 square feet of non-weight bearing walls on the side, 15 square feet will reduce to 600 square feet, and then it will become in zoning compliance. And Deborah Kelly is in agreement with it. I believe Mr. Harris was in general agreement with it. We were just asked to submit, you can actually see the survey now by Paul Stoll, which actually shows the area being removed, and the blue would be the area remaining. And we've been, it's a subject of a trust. Two of my clients are have a life use in the property and live there on the property. Other members of the trust are trustees. They do not live on the property. So my clients live on the property, but at the same time, on behalf of the trust, I have authority. I would have to have some trustees sign documents, but they've signed previous documents as well. So I do have authority for them to sign on behalf of the trust so that we can get this resolved. It really should only take 1 or 2 days of work. My client, the contractor, I have a licensed insured contractor. They realize they have to put a silt fence, soil erosion, and proper sediment control in the area. And so they're willing to do so. Mary Rose has come out to the property a couple of times. I think she saw it before the property wasn't clean, and then after it was clean, and then we've submitted the survey. I submitted a drawing of the building of how many square feet is being removed, and the fact that I stated earlier, it's non-weight bearing walls. So it's basically taking down thin metal from the sides and then putting a back on the garage. And as Mary Rose stated, it doesn't make sense really to remove the concrete slab in the back area, so that we propose that we would allow that as well.
Okay, great. Thanks for that overview. What's the prerogative of the agency? Are there questions? Would you like to request more information? Do you feel like we need to require a full application? Or do we want to approve the pre-application? Mr. Munson, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. This is pretty straightforward. I think asking for an application on this is kind of overkill. I think we could do it with jurisdictional, frankly.
Yeah, Mary Rose, that was going to be my question. Would this be, could this be a JR, or would that be essentially the equivalent of a pre-application?
The pre-application can be, the agency can consider it as a jurisdictional ruling. The first section of section 4 allows people use and enjoyment of the property. So in this case, the trust is looking to enjoy their property by removing the non-compliant portion of the garage, using appropriate methods with a licensed insured contractor and erosion controls. We wouldn't be able to condition those things, but should they not use them and something goes south, then we'd have to issue a violation. And that's, Attorney Tramuta has been working on this for a bit to try to get it straightened out. And I don't think that's going to happen.
That's not a risk. Yeah. Mr. Matthew Connors, did you also have a question?
It was just around the erosion controls and possibly having it some sort of documentation, but Mary Rose basically just answered it for me.
All right, do we have a motion? Mr. Munson?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. Mr. Chairman, I move that the designated agent issue a jurisdictional ruling for pre-application IW240050 43 Rogers Avenue for the removal of the rear 15-foot by 31-foot portion of existing garage down to the slab with work within 150 feet of a wetland and the Wetland River watershed as shown on the site plan entitled Zoning Location Survey prepared for Baselli Orazio, trustee of the Orazio 43 Rogers Avenue, Milford, Connecticut, by Powell J. Stowell. 2 sheets dated March 12th, 2022, revised October 21st, 2024. This action will not have an impact or effect on the physical characteristics of the adjacent wetlands and water courses. That is my motion.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and we have a second by Mr. Matthew Connors. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, Lisa, roll call vote.
Daniel Bedecker,
Aye.
Ranjit Bahav,
Aye.
Brian Black,
Aye.
Brian Black,
Aye.
Jim Connors, Jim,
That's a yes.
That's a yes.
okay, Matthew Connors, Steve Munson,
Aye.
Nick Ritchie,
Aye.
Julie Valvo,
Aye.
is that a yes?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, and Brendan Magnan.
Yes, aye. Okay, so the motion carries unanimously. Mr. Tramuta, good luck with the work there. Thanks for coming before us.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate your cooperation, and I will assure that it will be done properly
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice night.
too.
Excellent. Moving on, I believe it's E3. Mary Rose, do you want to introduce this one?
E3 is 240083 at 0 Daniel Street. Discussion of this item has been postponed until our next meeting. So the agency can table or take no action.
Okay, we'll take no action, given that it's postponed. Thank you. And at this time, Mr. Field, we're going into item E1 if you want to recuse yourself. You're on mute, Mr. Field.
Oh, do I just sign off?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, have a good night.
Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, moving on. Mary Rose, do you want to introduce us to IW 240082, 843 North Street, map 115, block 801, parcel 26, 843 North Street, LLC.
This application's on the agenda for the first time this evening. The engineer for the project had to present to public or planning and zoning this evening. Due to the election, the zoning meeting and the first meeting in November moved to the same night as our meeting. And as luck would have it, he had conflicting applications. He's asked that we table or take no action on this until our next meeting. After review of the information, if any of the commissioners have questions, if you get them to me, I'll get them to the commissioner, to the engineer.
Thank you, Mary Rose. Yes, if everyone could, before the next meeting, ideally in the next few days, review the link to the proposed construction plan and provide your initial questions to Mary Rose. And that would be great so that the next meeting we could be more prepared. Any questions on that matter? Okay, hearing none, we're going to take no action. Moving on to agenda item F, consideration of the minutes from the previous meeting. We have a motion to accept those as presented.
I'll
I
make the motion.
motion.
Who's got it?
I'll second.
Sorry.
I'll second.
Okay, who's got the first?
I'll
Matthew
make it.
Connors.
Okay, Mr. Connors, I think you spoke first, so thank you. Those are the October 16th, 2024 regular meeting minutes. Do we have any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, Lisa, roll call vote.
Daniel Bedecker,
Aye.
Ranjit Bahav,
I would like to abstain.
Brian Black,
Aye.
Jim Connors. Jim?
Unmute.
Aye. Can you hear me now?
Okay, Yep, yep. Matthew Connors? Steve Munson?
Aye.
Nick Ritchie?
Aye.
Julie Valvo?
Aye.
Brendan Magnan?
Aye, motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, if I can ask who the second was on that?
Nick Ritchie?
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for your continued great diligence on those meeting minutes, Lisa, as well. Complete that. Mary Rose, turning it over to you for staff report.
Just a quick review. All my notes are in the motions and notes that I sent out earlier this evening. We've been busy as the end of season. We're very dry, so everyone watch that fire danger outside. We're still working on the CRS larger project that should come full circle on the 15th. And we're working with IT and MIS on review of the software that we use. And a reminder that Mr. Bedecker, Bahave, and Mr. Bedecker and Jim Connors will, terms will be expiring on the 31st of December. You will get something from the mayor's office to ask if you wish to consider. And Mr. Bave, your reappointment is on the agenda for the zoning board this evening. I hear that it's going well. So I believe you will be re-recommended by the zoning board to the mayor's office for reappointment.
Okay, thank you. That's assuring.
Does anyone have any questions for me?
No?
No questions, just thanks very much, Mayor Rose, for keeping the office running and for facilitating those nominations for service. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to move on to Chair's report. Thanks very much for the attentive discussion, great interaction with the applicants this evening. Really appreciate it. Appreciate your time, your volunteerism. The next regular meeting will be November 20th, right here on Zoom. Remind me, Mayor Rose, is the Kakiwak before that? It's the Saturday before that, right?
Right. Kakiwik is Saturday the 16th in Bristol. They may still have room if anyone wants to do a last minute sign up. Just please let Taft or I know.
Indeed. If you want to carpool, we can do that as well.
All right. Thank you.
Terrific. Unless there's any other questions, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Sure do.
Great. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Lisa.
Aye.
Aye.
Right.
Daniel Bedecker,
The dog.
Aye.
Ranjit Bahav,
Aye.
Brian Black,
Aye.
Jim Connors, Jim.
Aye.
Okay. Matthew Connors,
Aye.
Steve Munson,
Aye.
Nick Ritchie,
Aye.
Julie Valvo,
Aye.
Brendan Magnan.
Aye. I was going to mouth my eye, but then I thought that might be too forward. Thank you very much. Meeting is adjourned. Have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.